Hey, everybody. Welcome to another deep dive in the MacSparky Labs. I'm going to actually switch my glasses out really quick. I forget these glasses reflect my lights too much. You can't really see my eyes. But I'm really excited about this month's session. And the reason is because it's all about setups, which is something I mention on the show quite a bit. But I feel like it's something that I haven't covered enough. And I wanted to start out with the deep dive folks so we could kind of talk through it and maybe even get some ideas and see how it works. I've been mentioning setups. I did a segment on this on the Keyboard Maestro Field Guide, but somebody wrote me and said, "Hey, can you do that with shortcuts? Because I don't want to learn Keyboard Maestro." And I said, "Well, maybe." And then so I spent some time studying it and playing with it, and came up with a very workable solution to do this with shortcuts. It's good enough that I want to share it with you. And I think this will hopefully open up these setups to a lot of different people who haven't tried them before, because this makes it easier to get them going. Let me just show you. I've got just a couple slides to kind of get started today, just to kind of set the tone here. Let me share my screen. All right, so shortcuts-based setup. So we're doing setups with shortcuts. So let's talk about our brains. I feel like one of the biggest tricks for us as computer users is finding ways to shortcut the pathways in our brain to get work done and to focus on things using our technology. And I think one of the ways you do that is you wire the way your computer presents itself to you, to your brain, and then suddenly it triggers modes. And a setup is a really great example of that. For example, I have a setup that I deal with customer service, and it puts me up with the mail exactly where I want, and it puts me on the web pages exactly where I want. And suddenly I see that on my screen and I think, oh, I'm in customer service mode. I'm going to be doing that now. And it helps me work harder and faster. And so that's what setups are. They're pretty simple. There's a few elements to them. The first is usually you want to have specific applications open on your device. So we're going to open some applications, and then we want to do app settings and views. And it really depends on what you're doing. Sometimes just having the app open is enough. Other times you want to set things up. For example, if you're doing something with your calendar, maybe you want it to be on monthly mode and just showing these specific calendars. Or maybe if you're opening Safari, you want to open a specific web page or something like that. So you can do those settings and views. And then we want to arrange the way they look on the screen. And that one took a little finagling. I can't wait to share some tips with you on that, how I figured that out. And then because we're in shortcuts, there's other things we get for free. Focus modes is one of them. I'm a big fan of focus modes. It allows you to adjust what notifications you get and a whole bunch of stuff about your Mac. And you can throw that with a single switch in shortcuts. I'm going to show you that. And if you do any kind of timing, you can set a timer too. So we're just going to combine all that automation. The last thing for me is a lot of times I put audio in. I have tinnitus, so I like to get noise in my ears when I'm working, and different things require different noise. But that's one more trigger for my brain. You know, I'm hearing this kind of music or sound. I see these apps on my screen. It really does help me move a set app. And so the question was, is this possible in shortcuts? Yes, it is. So that's what I want to talk to you about today is how we do that. I really feel like this whole idea of a setup is something that people don't give enough credit for. It really makes a difference. And whoops, let me just save this. Sorry. There we go. It makes a difference for your ability to get like in the zone and start doing work. You know, they call it flow, and any shortcut we can get to flow, I think, can help us get there. So I'm going to go ahead and open shortcuts so you can see. Whoops, wrong app. Shortcuts. There we go. And so I can just show you what my setups look like. There we go. And this is a work in progress for me because I've been building these out slowly, but I've got a folder now in shortcuts, and the shortcuts is called setups. And I've just been slowly adding to it and building it. And one of the nice things about this, you'll see, is as you figure it out, these are easy to duplicate and modify. So as you figure out the various tricks we're going to show, you can very quickly start building them out for all the various setups that you need. The first thing that you do with a setup, in my opinion, is you hide your existing windows. You don't want a setup to build on top of another one, because then all of a sudden your desktop gets very cluttery. And as part of this experiment, one of the things that I've been doing is, you guys may recall, I did a whole screencast with you where I shared with you all my spaces. Well, now I only have 2 spaces, and the only reason I've got this one is because that's where I record the Obsidian Field Guide stuff. But otherwise, I've been running everything in one space. Historically, I would have another space with comms on it, like email and text messages and stuff. But I realized it was too easy for me to swipe over to that screen. And I thought, well, why don't I make it add a barrier, make this stuff a little harder for me, so I'm less likely to go over there. And so I did that. I just got rid of all the spaces, and this is an experiment. I'm only like a month in it, but if I want to do email and comms, I actually do the email and comms setup, and I close my other windows, open these windows. There's like a barrier there that makes it harder for me to go into that stuff. So I'm frankly less likely to do it, and then I can just focus on the stuff that I need to be working on. So I've got one space to do this, and since I've got one space, then I want to have the ability to hide the windows when I start. So this is a very simple action: hide all apps. If you search in shortcuts, you can find it, hide app, and then you click this button and say all apps. All right. You can also have it hide specific apps if you want, but for the purpose we're doing it, it's hide all apps. And then that opens up this choose menu. If there's something that you always want to leave open, you can do that. And because you're setting these up per setup, you can make exceptions on the fly as you need them. So you may have one setup where you do always want to leave some app available, but then in others you don't. All right, so that's the first step, is to hide all apps. And just if I run that, you see I just hit all apps. So great, we know that works. So that's the first step of this building block. The next one, I'm going to go over to this journaling one here. The next step would be for me to turn on a focus mode. And so I've got one here, personal. I've got a personal focus mode when I'm journaling. I put it in focus mode. I have too many focus modes, and that's probably a subject for another day. But the focus mode I want to set when I'm journaling is personal. It's not something where I want to be hidden from the world. And I turn it on until it's turned off. Now, to find that, just type focus, and you'll find it's always towards the bottom for me. There it is, set focus. And it allows you to select which focus mode you're going to be on and how long it's going to be on. You say turn it on. You can say until a certain time, until I leave, until the event ends. Since I'm constantly switching focus modes all day, I prefer to just leave it on until turned off, because inevitably some other automation I run is going to switch it to something else. So for me, at least, this is just fine, saying turn it on until it's turned off. All right. Then the next thing I do is I can run a timer, and this is in Timery. It's actually running a shortcut where I say track journal, but we could do that separately. Timery has its own actions. So I say Timery. Let me try again. There we go. Timery, start saved timer. So I could just say, focus journal. That's what I do. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to run a timer in Timery. When you add an action in Timery, just word to the wise, it shows when run by default. I don't want that. I just want the timer to turn on. I don't need to see a little dialog box that says it just turned on. So I uncheck that. All right. So that's the next couple steps. Is we're going to hide all apps. Then we're going to turn on a focus mode and set a timer. And then we're getting into the part where we're opening applications. And in this case, this is a simple one. I open day one, and I open the Photos app, because day one has that feature when you drag a photo in, it allows you to set a new journal entry based on the time of that photo, something that I find quite useful. All right, so that's just opening 2 apps. Now, the final part of this one, and this is where I had to get a little tricky, is doing the window setup. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do window setups in shortcuts. One of them is they have window commands. So you can, and I covered this in the shortcuts field guide, but you can resize a window if you want, and you can resize it to the left half or the right half. It's got various methods here to resize a window. The problem I found is that is an unstable shortcut. For some reason, sometimes it just decides not to work. And I've submitted a bug to Apple. Maybe that'll get better next month and we won't have to do this Apple script nonsense. But in the meantime, it's not a reliable shortcut action for me. So I gave up on it. So I needed to find a plan B for that. And for that, I went to Moom. And Moom is this great app that you can get. I highly recommend it if you want to do window arrangement. It's by far my favorite. And this is the little settings for Moom. But the way it works is you can enable it where you can resize windows based on a grid system. So like you see, if I click this grid right here, now I can go up and say, well, I want the window to start right there and end right there. And it automatically makes it fit. And I'm going to go over here and say, well, I want this window to start right here and end right there. And now I've got a nice setup for these windows that I like. And this is far beyond what Apple can do with shortcuts. Even if the shortcuts action worked, you wouldn't be able to get it customized like this, with this grid system. And the other thing that Moom does is it allows you to save custom setups. All right, so I'm going to go over to this custom button here in Moom, and I'm going to say create a new one. And we're going to call this a arrange windows. You guys with me so far? And then we're going to give it a name. I'm going to say sample DD for the deep dive. And that's going to be the arrangement of these windows with shortcuts. So then I can go ahead and save that snapshot. And it's called sample DD. So I'm just going to copy that, sample DD. And then now go back to the shortcut. And this is text. I'll put it in the download for this video so you can just copy and paste it. But it's a pretty simple Apple script. It's on run is there by default in shortcuts anytime you do an Apple script. The actual Apple script is just these two steps. Tell application, Moom, has to be in quotes, to arrange windows according to the snapshot. And I had journaling in there, but I'm going to change that to sample DD. And that's the name that we saved up here in Moom. So if we go up here and there it is, sample DD, and then return input and end. So all I'm doing is telling Moom with an Apple script to run that one little action that arranges the windows to it. Now I'm going to run this, and actually this won't work when I run it because this action opens journaling apps and the photos, and the Moom arrangement is about shortcuts, but it works. So I'll just go up to Moom now and just trigger sample DD, and you see it works. So that would have happened in the middle of the shortcut as well. All right, so that was a lot to digest. I want to get into it a little deeper, but do you guys have any questions at this point about what I've done so far? David, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, quick question in terms of Windows management. I've did Moom, and yeah, it's also one of my favorite, but I was curious if you had also tried Keyboard Maestro for that, and if you had any feedback on that.
Yeah, Keyboard Maestro is equally good for this. You can set it, and with Keyboard Maestro, they've got default settings, and you can also set it per pixel. But the whole idea of this magic trick is they do it without Keyboard Maestro. We're trying to set it up in a way that people who don't have Keyboard Maestro can do setups. I find Keyboard Maestro a little fiddly. It works 100% of the time. Keyboard Maestro is a little fiddly in terms of setting window management. Keyboard Maestro is the best solution for window management if you have multiple monitors, because with Keyboard Maestro, you can address each monitor independently. So it makes it really easy to set windows on different screens. But for this kind of thing, I think Moom is probably the preferred tool. I also like the gutter that Moom has. I don't know if you noticed. Let me just share my screen one more time real quick. There's a nice little gutter between these windows. I kind of like that. I like the space, but that's just a personal preference thing. And you could do that with Keyboard Maestro too, but it would take a little more work. Steve?
You may have already answered my question, David. I was just whether with multiple monitors, I'm on a 2-monitor setup where I may want to have one app on one screen and one app on the other. You mentioned Keyboard Maestro. Is there a way of doing that in shortcuts, or is it really best in Keyboard Maestro?
At this point, it's really not practical with shortcuts, but as I understand it, my camera's out of focus. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. But at this point, I think next month that story might get a little better from things I've heard. But I don't know. We'll see. But if you're using it on multiple monitors, you may want to do it with the Moom. I loaned my fancy camera to my sister-in-law so they could take graduation photos, and this webcam is flaking out. For some reason, it's decided not to focus on me. So I'm sorry about that. All right. So yeah, to answer your question, if I was using multiple monitors, I would probably run this stuff through Keyboard Maestro, and you could do everything I've shown you through Keyboard Maestro if you wanted. It's not quite as clean when it comes to some of the stuff where the built-in actions are easy, like setting focus modes, but you can set a focus mode via Keyboard Maestro just by running the shortcut action there or running an Apple script. There's more, the beauty of the Mac these days is the automation stuff is they all talk together. So you can make all this stuff happen pretty much anywhere. Did I answer your question? I feel like I rambled a little bit.
And also if you usually have that app on one particular screen, you can also just set it under options for that app. Do it on screen number 1, display number 2, and even in a particular space. So when it's launched, the Mac automatically just puts it on that monitor.
Yeah, and I'll do a little more research on that, Steve. There may be a way to address that in shortcuts. I just don't have multiple monitors, so I haven't had an opportunity to test. If anybody here has done multiple monitors addressing them via shortcuts, let me know. And I don't know that Moom. I think Moom might solve that problem too. But again, I'll have to yank an extra monitor out of the garage and see if I can play with it and get it to work. But I expect you'll probably be able to do that stuff via shortcuts as well.
Moom works fine on multiple monitors.
Okay.
David?
Yeah, good. Yeah. So if you set up and you save the setup, the window arrangement set up with Moom, that would, I would guess, solve it as well. That's a whole nother discussion in multiple monitors. All right. So anyway, that's the kind of the starting point for this is, addressing those issues, but you can go deeper with this stuff too. So let me share some of that with you. Hold on a second here. I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So in addition to, the basics of getting some apps up and running, you can also go in and do, you can do more in and out. For instance, my calendar stuff is a good example, or actually the planning one was even better. Let me find here. Daily planning is one that I use every morning, and it sets a focus mode. It starts a timer, a planning focus timer, and then it hides the windows. It turns work focus mode on. It opens Fantastical, but then it does some work in Fantastical. It changes the active calendar set to Sparky Operations with Planning, which is a specific calendar set I have. It switches the view to the week view. Then it goes to today in Fantastical, so it sets the application to today. So if it's 3 weeks out in the future, it goes to today. Then it opens OmniFocus. And then it does a bunch of stuff here this is very hacky stuff, but Better Touch Tool gives you the ability to send keyboard shortcuts to apps via shortcuts. This is one of the reasons why I thought I wouldn't be able to do it with shortcuts, but Better Touch Tool gives us a solution. So I'm telling, once OmniFocus opens, it's sending Control 1, which opens a specific window, then it sends Control, and you can see it just depends on which boxes you throw. Control T, which gives you Control Shift T, which gives you another tab. Then it goes to another perspective with Control Shift 3. I'm just going through and typing in all the keyboard shortcuts for my various perspectives that I use in OmniFocus with a Control Shift T in between each one, which creates a new tab in OmniFocus. Then it opens up the Sparky Media project list in Craft, and then it arranges all of that with a Moom setup called Daily Planning. I'm going to go ahead and run this and see what happens. It should work. It works every morning. All right, there we go. So it's setting the focus mode. It's opening the calendar. You can see the calendar switched views. It's opening OmniFocus, doing all that tab stuff. And that's how I like the windows arranged. So I can jump between these two apps very easily and then have my calendar on my right. And that's a setup. And that's an example of how this stuff works for me. And as I go through my day, I just trigger these things. And all I do is go in and type setup, and then they're all there. And I can pick which one I want to do next. And it just opens up for me, and I'm off to the races. And that's the whole idea. I mean, this stuff isn't rocket science, and I'm really kind of pleased with that, because I want people to be able to use this stuff. And I feel like all the prior solutions I've done with this have been a little bit of a hack. I mean, going in Keyboard Maestro and programming this stuff isn't super difficult, but it's not trivial either. I feel like with this new shortcuts method, anybody can do it. You've already got the software on your Mac. And once you figure one out, you can duplicate that and just change the names of the apps. You can go in Moom and resort the way the windows are set up. Just change the name of the saved window arrangement in Moom. And this stuff really is not that difficult. I thought if you guys want, we could build one together. But before I do that, is there any other questions?
Yeah, David, could you go back? How are you sending those keyboard commands? What were you?
Yeah, sorry, I did that kind of fast. Let me open that up for you. This is, you got to have Better Touch Tool installed.
Okay.
And if you go in Better Touch Tool.
Oh, okay. So were you calling a URL callback in Better Touch Tool?
No, I'm not. That's what you think. It seems like something that complicated, but it's not that complicated. Okay. All you're doing is you're sending a keyboard shortcut. And first of all, if you look on the right, this is why you should have Better Touch Tool. Look at all these actions they've added to shortcuts.
David, you're not sharing right now.
Oh, sorry, guys.
No
sorry,
problem.
You got me wound up there.
I don't want to wind you up.
Okay, no.
Wound up in the command, and I definitely have Better Touch Tool.
In the best of ways. There we go. Okay, so I've got Better Touch Tool here, and if you scroll down, you say send keyboard shortcut, and it's like, this is like when we had Apple on the Mac Power users after they announced shortcuts. I asked them specifically this: will we be able to send keyboard shortcuts and trigger menu items? And the Apple rep said, oh, that's not really in our vision for shortcuts. And I was thinking, well, shit, I need that, because that's your get out of jail free card when you're doing automation. And so the guy over at Better Touch Tool just wrote it and stuck it in his app, and nobody at Apple's ever said anything. So we get it now. But basically, you drag this action in, and then you decide, is it going to be a control or is it going to be a command? Yes or no. And you just click this. Is it going to be control? Yes or no. And it's got all the modifier keys here. And then you type in a character, or you can type in a key code. So if you've got a code for a key that isn't a character, you can do that. And you can address it to whichever app you want. So what I've done here is I'm sending command and then T to OmniFocus, which is opening a new tab. It's a very much kind of hacky when you think about it, but it works. And whereas in Keyboard Maestro, you would have to program in pauses, like do a 0.2 second pause so the app can catch up. I don't find I have to do that with shortcuts. I just put the commands in, it does the thing, it opens the apps. So if you're doing a setup with anything that involves going to a specific menu item, or changing app tabs or whatever, you can do that with this Better Touch Tool command. Another one that's very useful for this is the Safari Open URL command.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do a setup that involves going to a specific web page, I don't want to put the customer service URL on a public video, but like when I go in to do customer service for the MacSparky Labs, there's very specific URLs I go to where I can access the customer data and deal with whatever the problem is. and I just have it open that URL once it opens Safari. And so in a lot of ways, this is easier than doing it in Keyboard Maestro because it's just so basic. But I find it's, when you add tricks like URL calls and this better touch tool trick, it actually is very usable.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. David, you had your hand up too?
Yeah. Is there anything on Better Touch Tool that we need to set up to activate this feature? Because this is awesome.
No, just install Better Touch Tool, and then it's in Shortcuts.
Thank you.
If you have SetApp, you can get it for free with your SetApp subscription. If not, buy it from the developer. I think that's one of the things that tripped up Apple is that any app that donates actions to Shortcuts on iPhone or iPad is on an app that goes to the App Store. My guess is there's some sort of filtering in the app review process where they say, well, what did this person add to Shortcuts? But on the Mac software, you can donate actions with apps that don't get sold through the App Store. So Apple never reviews this app. And they have all these great shortcut actions, and Apple has really no say in what he adds. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I talked about this in the Shortcuts for Mac Field Guide, but like all this stuff, like show a menu bar item in the contextual menu, select something from the menu, all the little tricks you need to really like add automation to apps that don't support automation is found with the Better Touch Tool actions and Shortcuts. You guys want to build one together real quick? All right. So, well, I'm just going to make a new one. Sample setup. All right. And so I'm going to have it open. First thing I'm going to do is hide all. So select the hide app, and we're going to change that to all apps. And then we'll set a focus mode. And I'm using search here as I go through. I find this the fastest way to get that done. Set focus. And we'll say work until on, until turned off. And then let's open Safari. Oops. I'm actually going to Safari Actions. I want to open app. There we go. Open app. Safari. And we'll do another open app action. For this one, I'm just going to right click on this one and say duplicate. So now I've got another version of it below. And what can we open here? About Reader. That's my RSS app. And then we can, when we do on Safari, let's open a URL. So I'm going to say open a URL. I did something really quick there. In fact, let me do it again so you see. When I drug this action in, it grabbed the app from the prior step, drew a little line here. So it's trying to say, oh, you did something in the action before. Let me add it to this one. Open a URL. I don't know why I grabbed an app because that's not a URL. So I just cleared that out. Now I'm going to type in www.macsparky.com, and let's just run that for now as a test, see how everything goes. We hide all apps. You can see there's my focus work mode. There's the MacSparky website, and there's the RSS app. So everything worked there. You can see I haven't opened it in a while, but that worked. So now let's arrange the windows. We'll put RSS like that, and we'll make Safari like this. And then we're going to go into Moom and save that as a custom setup. So I'm going to go to the Moom menu bar item, hit preferences, and we're going to save this as sample DD. Update snapshot. Okay, now I'm going to go back to shortcuts. And then I'm going to just copy the action from another one because I don't want to try and look up that Apple script. And you're going to be able to do the same thing. So I'm going to go into an existing action that has the Apple script in it and hit copy. And then I'm going to go back to the sample setup, and I'm going to go to the bottom one and right click on it and then say paste below. And we're going to change the name to sample DD. And that's all the Apple script you need to do to make this work. I'm giving you the script in the downloadable shortcut that'll come out with the video. Whoops. I always hit the little hammer here to build the shortcut after you make changes to it, just to make sure everything looks good. All right, so now we've got that done. We can go ahead and test that with a run. And it's putting everything where it should be, but that's because we closed it that way, and the Mac remembers Windows state, so let's mess it up a little bit. All right, now I'm going to go to shortcuts again and run this again. And Moom should snap them together. There we go. Okay, so everything's working. And honestly, that's enough for this shortcut to get started. Now, you could go further down the rabbit hole if you wanted. You could open specific views. You could have it play some music. I didn't do that for you. One of my favorites when I work is to have dark noise running. And I think this is kind of a personal thing. I don't think many people do this, but dark noise is an app that makes, background noise for you. So I would add a play noise here. And my favorite one is the thunderstorm. And so I would just say thunderstorm. So play a thunderstorm. But you could also have it open an Apple Music playlist or, it's shortcuts. Anything audio you want to play, you can play through it. But that's a sample. I mean, this stuff really isn't that difficult, but I think it can be quite powerful if you set them up. And the trick is to set them up for all the work modes that you move throughout the day. Like if you spend time, I can just tell you an example for me. So I spend time in the morning planning. So I have a planning setup. Then I do, in the morning, I do a very quick review of email. I don't try to spend a lot of time on it, but if there's something on fire, I'll deal with it. Otherwise, it gets all pushed to the afternoon. So then I change the setup to the email. But then I change the setup to whatever I'm working on. If it's recording a podcast, then it would be all the tools to do that. Or if it's making videos or, because I'm a content creator. But back in the day when I made my living being a lawyer, it would be Microsoft Word and my research app or whatever it is that you use to pay for your shoes. So you make those setups and you jump through them throughout the day, and you can trigger them with any one of the many launcher apps for shortcuts. And boy, I find it useful. I'm so impressed with the way Shortcuts does this that I'm in the process of moving all of my setups over to Shortcuts. I don't think I need to do these through Keyboard Maestro anymore. And Keyboard Maestro is great, and there's a lot of stuff it can do that Shortcuts can't. But for this particular problem, I actually think Shortcuts is the better solution. Thoughts or comments?
I'm in the circle between Keyboard Maestro and Bunches right now, and now you've just complicated my life again.
You're welcome.
So
you're welcome.
Thanks for that, David.
Bunches is great. It's made by a friend of mine. Bunches can be a little fiddly, and I found myself using Bunches and triggering shortcuts actions via Bunches, and I thought, well, why don't I just do it all in Shortcuts?
Yeah.
And the main reason I really went down this rabbit hole is there's a lot of people for whom Bunches is a bridge too far. And I thought, well, anybody should be able to take advantage of this. And you can with shortcuts. Everybody has shortcuts installed. Can I solve the problems most people have with these setups with just the built-in software? And I think you can, none of the stuff I did here was that difficult. There's one Apple script call, and that's just because the window management stuff is kind of broken. But I understand there's some big updates coming to Shortcuts, and maybe in a month that we'll be able to run the window arrangement in Shortcuts too. You're never going to get the window arrangement like I had on my screen where I've got very customized sizes on the Moom grid. Shortcuts just isn't going to go that far down the rabbit hole. But I think if you just want to put one app on the left side and one app on the right side, and that's good enough, you'll probably be able to do that in Shortcuts too. But yeah, I know there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I didn't even mention Bunch, but yeah, Bunch, Keyboard Maestro, shortcuts. I think I'm leaning towards just doing it in shortcuts, to tell you the truth. It's just too easy. And then when you want to make a new one, you duplicate it. I like the visual nature of shortcuts. I know Bunch's selling point is that it's just a text file, but shortcuts is very visual. And if I want to change dark noise from the thunderstorm to the rainstorm, I can just go in and click one button and it's done for me.
Yeah, it's nice.
Any other questions or comments or about all this?
Do you have any concerns with the shortcuts breaking from time to time whenever Apple sets us up and being so dependent upon them?
Not for this stuff. I mean, I started the experiment about 3 months ago and nothing's broken. Actually, I was running beta on this Mac. I was running the beta of the Mac OS and it was still working fine. And I think for the stuff we're doing here, it's going to be fine. When shortcuts breaks, it's usually on the more exotic stuff. I mean, shortcuts, you're going to be hard pressed to find a lot of bugs in shortcuts if you have shortcuts that are 10 steps or less. But as soon as you start getting very advanced shortcuts, shortcuts is inevitably going to break. Chris, what's up?
So I had two questions. One is anyone else experiencing like major slowdowns in shortcuts when just searching for a shortcut, like just using the regular search? Because every now and again I'll go in there and I'll look for something and it'll take forever. I don't know what's going on with it, but it just seems like it's having trouble indexing.
All right, so I'm sharing my screen now. I just want to see. Yeah, I don't generally have a problem. So to search for a new action, for example, all right, we're going to go in here. Let's just do it. I'll say OmniFocus. That's pretty fast. I don't know. Safari. This is on the public build of the current operating system. Is it slower than that for you?
Sorry, David. It's not. You're not sharing.
Well, I thought I just turned that on. I'm sorry. I guess I need to do a deep dive on turning on sharing and Zoom. All right. So here I am just looking through my OmniFocus, searching pretty fast.
Definitely quicker than mine for that. But I was talking about the like looking for the actual shortcut in your full.
Oh, in the database. Gotcha. How many shortcuts do you have?
I'm sure not as many as you.
I've got 822.
Yeah, no, I'm maybe around 220 or something like that.
So I just typed track because I got track as a trigger word for a lot of timer-based ones, and it found them pretty fast. I don't know.
I think maybe I'm dealing with a more specific thing on my setup. Any advice on how to go about debugging that?
What I would think is that maybe a cache issue. And I would look into resetting the cache or rebuilding the search database in shortcuts. I would Google that. I don't know that there's a way to do it offhand, but there's probably some mechanism to redo that. It sounds to me like you've got maybe a cache or like a corrupted, because they have the search database is generated and they search that. They're not actually searching the actual shortcuts, as I understand it. So you may want to try rebuilding it.
Would Clean My Mac do that?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, I think that's too exotic of a problem. I said somebody was weighing in the chat on that. Hold on, it just went by so fast I didn't get to read it.
I had a second very specific question for you. I don't know if you want to take a guess at this one, but I was looking for in day one, which is part of my morning setup, to retrieve yesterday's entry, and I haven't been able to find a way to pull up like a specific entry.
Yeah, I don't think the way I would look for that would be some sort of like a URL call into the app to give you yesterday's entry, because they don't give you a shortcuts action for that. But I don't even know that you could do that with something like Apple Script.
I haven't found it in their X callback is kind of like the documentation is a bit sparse. So
I'm gonna make a note of this. I'm actually in the developers the developers, they have like an insider group. I'm in that. I'm going to ask them about it and I'll get back with you. and maybe there's some way to get in that they've not published. But yeah, getting it to show a specific date on open, I'm not aware of a public way to do that. But let me look into that there.
I think you can search by date, but you can't find a specific entry. That's my issue, right? Because I'm able to get it to bring up the main screen focused on that date.
Yeah.
But, of course, I just want to be picky.
No, I get it. That's exactly the kind of geeky stuff I get excited about. Yeah. Let me ask, because there must be a unique identifier for each entry.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so the question is, how do we access it?
Oh, someone there?
Yeah, you can share the entry, and then it'll give you the ID of that entry, right?
Yeah.
So
but how do you call it? Yeah, independently. All right, Chris, let me get back with you on that. I'll send you an email if I can get some answers. Mark.
Thank you. So I tossed it in the chat, but I'm shouting it out loud so you actually pick up on it and you're not forced to read the chat afterwards. Because I know I never read the chat logs to my own Zoom meetings. So the request is when we're done and when you have time to breathe, of some of these shortcuts would be nice. I don't expect you to share your shortcuts.
No, I'll share. I'm actually going to share the shortcuts, or a couple of them, because the Apple script is too hard to like program from a screen. But it's no problem. I mean, it's going to open your version of Safari or your version of day one. It's not going to give you my day one. It's just, that's kind of the joy of shortcuts, is that it'll just adapt itself to your system. But yeah, I'll share downloadable shortcuts with this.
The biggie for me would be variety, because I went back and looked at the Keyboard Maestro course and I asked myself, why did I not do this when I took the Keyboard Maestro course over a year ago? And I think the answer is I didn't get enough inspiration.
Okay, well, hopefully we inspired you today.
You gave me a lot more ideas, but it's like I can't take notes fast enough in Obsidian to get this taken care of.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'll give you several, and the nice thing is once you get them, get a couple working ones and just use that duplicate function I showed you. Just duplicate it, change the app names, maybe change the window setup, and before you know it, you've got them. I think for most people, you really only need 3 or 4. I have like 12 at this point, but I'm getting super granular. Like if I want to record ads for a specific podcast, it opens the URLs for that and does that. I mean, the whole idea of these setups is that you push a button and your computer transforms itself into a machine to do the kind of work you want to do right now. And I find it very useful that way. Jim, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I've got a question about a shortcut that I'm trying to do that's similar to what you do when you create a template for an idea or a project, and then you put a link into your project list, your project status list. I've got something like that for blog posts, but I can't seem to get the link to work properly to go into the project status work. It creates the template, and I fill out the title, and I fill out the other information. But when I do a link, it sends the title to the status page, but it doesn't link it. And I've used your template, your shortcut as a sample, but it just doesn't work.
Okay, and that's using Craft, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a little bit separate from today's topic, but the idea is, what if I want to create a hyperlink in Craft to a named note? And usually the way you do that is you reduplicate the name of the note in double brackets, and just like Obsidian or Roam or Craft, it creates a link to it. Sometimes Craft fails on that. I know you sent me an email. I owe you a response, and I just haven't got to it yet. But sometimes it just fails. But also you can make mistakes with the shortcut. Like when you insert the date, sometimes Craft just fails on it, and I don't know why. But other times, if the date that you insert, I found I had a bug in my shortcut where the date I was inserting was a different format than it was on the original creation, and that was causing a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I hope you guys are inspired a little bit to try these setups. I'd love to hear your questions and where it works and doesn't work for you. And I may do some more content on these things if people like them. From there, we'll go ahead and set up downloads from this. We'll have several of the shortcuts on that. I think I'm gonna turn off the recording. We can just chat a little bit if you want.